Warning, this content may be upsetting or disturbing to some audiences. What is the most unexplainable phenomenon you have experienced? My sister died in an accident about a week after I confronted her over her escalating drug habit. Our last conversation had been very frank and unpleasant, and she threw me out of her house, screaming that she hated me. After the funeral, I had a dream my sister and I were at karaoke singing something incoherent. In the gaps, I'm trying desperately to tell her I was sorry, and as the song finishes she says it doesn't matter now, she still loves me and I needed to help her daughter. I woke up and had a generally shitty day from being all wound up. Out of the blue I got a call from my niece who needed a place to live after her father said she couldn't live with him. I said she could stay with me and went to pick her up. She stayed with me for 5 years, and on her 21st birthday she told me she had a dream where her mother had told her to call me for help after her dad told her she could only stay with him for a week. When I was a kid I always kept a glass of water next to my bed. I would get thirsty at night and drink it and place the empty glass back down. A few hours later I would wake up thirsty again and the glass would be full. In fact, I never had to get up to refill that glass because I always knew my parents would fill it for me as I slept. This went on for years until one day I brought it up in conversation with my parents. They had no idea what I was talking about. I had a dream, a very detailed dream, about meeting a redhead at a gas station in Northern California. We got on so well in my dream that we agreed upon a time and date to meet. I woke up, remembered it, and thought, well shit, I'm probably insane but I'll still go. So 2 days later I drove up there to meet on the assigned date. Turns out 5 p.m. Thursday was when this person got into work at said gas station. They really existed. I met them. We're friends now. How? I'd recently moved into an apartment on the 27th floor of a 45-floor building. The balconies were built in such a way that they were inaccessible from neighboring apartments, unless you climbed directly up or down. You could not access a balcony from another balcony on the same floor. I used to leave the balcony door unlocked since it was so secure. One night I woke up and thought I heard the balcony door closing. I lay there for a while, then went to check. Closed. I double-checked the apartment door, locked and bolted. The next morning I woke up and there was a post-it on my bathroom vanity that reads, "Sorry, I needed to borrow some Oxy." I'd had a couple, like 4, pain pills left over from surgery. Nobody knew I had them, and I don't take them chronically. Nobody had visited me for several days. Nobody even knew I had these pills, so it wasn't a friend or anything. Nothing else stolen. The box, which had been under my sink with a few other medications, was on the vanity, empty. I called the police. It was a mess trying to explain it. It was basically impossible to have gained access to the apartment. The door had been bolted and the hallway security cameras hadn't picked up anybody. I obviously started locking the balcony door. 2 months later, one morning I noticed what I thought was some trash on the balcony floor. There was a Ziploc baggie with 6 pills in it, and a note. Same handwriting, "Sorry I couldn't get in, thanks for the land." I broke my lease and moved that month. Over the years people have tried to think of explanations but none make sense. It couldn't have been a prank because nobody knew about the meds in the first place. Nobody had a chance to leave those notes. It wasn't some random drug seeker because I was 27 floors up, and nothing else was stolen. There was also some OTC painkillers and some codeine that was right next to the pills that were stolen, that weren't touched. I didn't get up and sleepwalk because my watch would have picked up the movement. I have no explanation. My mother passed away while I was in college, and several years later while I was finishing my master's degree I gave birth to the sweetest baby girl with a broken heart. I abandoned my degree, moved back to my family and waited until they tried to repair it. They couldn't, and she passed away around a year. My family pushed me to go back for my final semester and finish my degree. It was one of the lowest points of my life returning back to school. I remember clear as day, and this was 20 years ago. Seeing my mom with my daughter on her lap in the passenger seat of my car as I pulled into the city. My daughter said, "Grandma, will she be okay?" and my mom said she will be now, and with it they both disappeared, and it was okay. My department welcomed me back with open arms. I completed my degree, and as my mom and daughter would both want, I was able to go on with my life and find happiness again. My mother-in-law was released from the hospital about a week before she died. While she was in there, someone gave her a rose that never bloomed. When she got home, it sat in a vase in the living room, a limp, dead bulb that never opened. The night she got taken away in the ambulance from which she would not emerge, I sat in her living room waiting for news, eyeing that rose and wondering why neither she nor my wife had bothered to water it or put it near a good light source. I guess it just wasn't a priority. My wife calls about a half hour later, around 2:30 a.m., letting me know they were unable to save her mother's life. I walk into the kitchen to get a drink and try to process the news, and when I pass back through the living room, not even 30 seconds later, the rose had completely opened up and blossomed. It was the brightest, most lively shade of red I've ever seen. A few hours later my wife troops in and I show her the flower and she is floored. She told me that right before her mother passed, she'd prayed that God would give her some kind of sign that her mom was okay, that she was up there somewhere, free from the pain and disease that had defined the majority of her life. That prayer had been barely 10 feet above her head when I hung up the phone and went into the kitchen, and that flower bloomed so suddenly. I have not ever been able to explain how this happened, how a dead rose that was as thin and brittle as a dry leaf, that would have crumbled to the touch a minute prior, could bloom into a healthy and supple bud in a matter of seconds with no light or water. It lived for a few weeks after this, long enough for my wife to get a good shot of it to bring to a tattoo artist. She'll wear its perfect likeness on her shoulder forever, in the hands of a porcelain angel that was at her mother's bedside for the last couple of years when the lupus had intensified beyond human capacity to feel. I've experienced a couple of miracles in my time, but this one is the only one I can't rationalize away as luck or coincidence. I guess that's what separates miracles from miracles. I dropped a $20 bill once in the side of my bed. I moved the bed to get it, but it wasn't there. Took the bed apart a while later because I was moving out and I expected it to have snuck into a crevice or something. Nope. It went to another dimension or something. My ghost story. I was riding my bike at night when I was away at college and I saw someone standing down the drive. They saw me coming and they walked into a lone pine tree next to the curb. Didn't see them go past it. Seemed odd, so I stopped and looked around at the tree. Nobody in it, nobody around. Would have totally seen this person walk away because it was a wide open area. Really freaky. Multiple times I've gotten a terrible sense of dread and immediately froze. Then a car I didn't even know was there going way too fast sped by that definitely would have hit me if I kept walking. It's happened enough times that I've lost count. Apparently I just know if I'm walking and I'm about to be hit by something. Not me, but my older brother. He was hiking with some friends and decided to shortcut the trail by climbing a small cliff. About 15 feet up, his weight shifted back, he lost his grip and fell. He told me that he was able to look behind him and saw his head was going straight for a jagged rock. But at the last second, something moved his head out of the way, so he landed inches next to it. As it was, he snapped his lower leg on a log and had to be rescued by the Park Service, but escaped with his life. When I was around 15 years old, I had a streak of 3 nights in a row of sleep paralysis. The first night I could barely see a shadowy figure with human shape, just standing directly in front of my bed. The second night I tried sleeping on my side to avoid having direct visual contact with the place where I had seen the figure. After a few hours the paralysis sets in again, and I start hearing undistinguishable whispers, and I was able to move because I felt a clear sensation as if a hand was lightly pressed against my knee. By the third night, I open my eyes, I realize I can't move, so I just start drifting in my mind, waiting for it to end. Suddenly, I hear a voice, clear as water, saying, "I am sorry to have bothered you." I wake up, all the lights are out, everything is quiet. I am 24 now, haven't had sleep paralysis since then. I honestly don't know what to make of that experience. Was about 12 years old, asleep in my bed. And at about 11 p.m. I wake up to a really loud sound. The tap in my room has turned on full blast. I obviously scream out loud and my dad comes running in, realizes the problem and turns off the tap. At the time he tells me not to worry and that it was just the pressure that turned it on. However, a couple ago, I'm 26 now, he told me he had lied to me back then and actually it took him a lot of force to turn the tap, as if it had been forced open. Really freaked him and me out. I was around 6 or 7 at the time. I used to sometimes sleep in my grandparents' bed because I was scared of the smoke detector when it blinked red for a split second. Don't judge, it was unsettling when I was trying to sleep. I remember falling asleep and waking up curled up in a ball at the bottom of the stairs. I had never had a history of sleepwalking, nor have I since. I was always really close to my grandmother. I was her first grandchild, and if I'm being honest, she spoiled the SHT out of me. She loved all her grandchildren, but I was definitely the favorite. Anyway, she had some medical issues which caused a heart attack. She was in the hospital in a coma, for lack of a better term, for about a month. In hindsight, we probably should have recognized the seriousness of it, but at the time we all expected she would be fine. She just needed time to recover. Maybe my grandfather knew more, but if he did, he never said and still hasn't said. Well, one morning I was about to get off from working night shift. I was finishing up some paperwork and my heart just started racing for no discernible reason. I was feeling lightheaded and my heart was seriously beating as if I'd just run wind sprints. Not even 10 minutes later, my mom calls me and tells me my grandmother had another heart attack and it wasn't looking good. I left work early and rushed to the hospital. Within a few hours she had a third and final heart attack and passed away with her family at her side. I don't know how to explain it, but I can't help but feel that my heart racing at the same time she was having a heart attack was me experiencing a little bit of what she was experiencing due to how close we were. I dropped a spoon on the floor and it just effing vanished. I looked everywhere for that thing. Nope. Out of existence. Gone. Yeah. My life is pretty uneventful. I am too late, but still. My aunt has worked in a home for the elderly for the last 30 years. On her very first soul shift, an old lady died in the night and the doctor told my aunt via phone that he would come in the morning to confirm the death. My aunt spent the night in that room as she had a feeling that this dead lady somehow has not left yet and wants SB to be with her. Fast forward 10 years. A woman knocks at my aunt's door. Tells her she was given the address by the retirement home, mine that was 20 years ago, when data protection was not a thing. The lady handed my aunt flowers and said she had a dream where her late mom would tell her about the night she died. And how she was scared to cross that border, and how a young woman stayed with her lifeless body all night, not leaving her side until her soul was ready. So after the dream, the daughter called the retirement home and asked about who it was that was on duty that night. They still had records about my aunt being there. Anyways, my aunt immediately recalled that night and invited the stranger in for some coffee and cake. Still moves me very much. I have one or two rather sad or creepy stories, but I also have one pretty nice story which I would rather tell. It's not exactly an explainable story, but one about nice coincidences. 5 years ago I was at a music festival with friends. Originally we wanted to camp with other friends who arrived a day earlier, but when we reached the camping grounds we couldn't reach any of them via cell phone, which was weird because we just spoke to them 30 minutes earlier and they expected us, and the place was far too big to just go and search for them, so we decided to just pick a nice free spot and set up our camp there. At the first two spots either the ground was shitty or the neighbors told us they needed the space for other friends who would arrive later. In the end we found a spot far in the back next to a half-finished camp. At some point our neighbors returned and one of them stepped into our pavilion to say hi, and I felt something like a small earthquake that exact moment. Nobody else felt anything and I thought I've lost my mind. But until this day I am 100% positive I felt some tremor. The camp neighbor later told this familiar story. He and his two friends wanted to camp with others who arrived earlier, but all of a sudden they couldn't get them on the phone anymore, so they picked a random spot. They searched for a while and dismissed other spots and then ended up there far in the back. Just like us, I am not a romantic person and it wasn't some cheesy stuff like love at first sight, but the guy who stepped into our camp that day would become my partner. I never met a person so compatible with me. Not only do we like the same music, we met on a festival, so that one is not surprising, but we also share the same interests, have the same opinion about marriage and kids, come from the same city. The festival was at the other end of the country, so that alone is a huge coincidence, and we both independently from each other planned to migrate to Norway. I still have no explanation for this earthquake I felt though. I have identical twin sons. When they were 3 I had to make a 6-hour round-trip drive, and I had to take them with me. They fell asleep on the way there, and they were still sleeping for most of the drive home. I figured I should wake them up to go to the bathroom. I pulled into a rest stop and parked the car. I turned around to wake them up, but before I said a word they both opened their eyes. They started talking in perfect unison. They said to me, Dad, we should tell you about the dream we just had. We were driving down the highway and we saw 3 piles of bones. One was me, one was my Bubba, and one was my full name. They closed their eyes. I sat there for 20 minutes or so to get my bearings before I started driving again, and they slept until we got home. If you made it to the end of the video, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share, and we will see you in the next video.